formed from the weathered granite, and that was used to make Chinese porcelain teapots. Do you think it was where granite was quarried? And that quarried granite was used to make kilns, where the ceramics were fired? Do you think it's something to do with the soil? And that where granite grows, yeah, there's a few words for soils, yeah. Soils, perhaps they're quite acidic, supporting teapot. And then we've got granite as a popular building stone, which was used to construct assembly rooms. And these were popular places for people to come together to drink tea. So, pardon? Probably, yeah. It's an interesting one, isn't it? So we're gonna move to one of my slides. I'm going to answer that question in a moment. So, am I doing the slides? Do you want me to do them? Like this, yeah. Thank you. I'm here because I'm really interested in the connection with what we do as scientists and how that connects people to the world that they live in. I'm really passionate about that. I've done that for over 20 years. And I have a long history of working in geoheritage and geoconservation. About 15 years actually working for a World Heritage Site in England, the Jurassic Coast. You might have heard of it, possibly. But my passion is, how do we, as scientists, bridge that gap between the work we do, which is for the benefit of people, and how do we bring people on that journey along with us? Because we have an extremely difficult job working in this sector. It's very isolating. It's a complex subject. It involves physics, chemistry, and biology. And for the most part, for the people that I meet every day, you know, when I say I'm an earth scientist, usually they look at me and say, is that a job? Is that what you do? What is that? You know, and so we as a science need to do better, to speak in a language and use narratives and stories to bring people into the space that we exist in every day. So how is granite connected to tea? It's actually through the weathering process. So the first question was the right answer. 300 million years ago in China, near a town called Jingdezhen, there were huge granite batholiths that were forming. And over tens of millions of years, these batholiths weathered away to form huge reserves, these deposits of kaolinite. Kaolinite actually comes from a Chinese word for the hill where this deposit was found, called kaolinite. And at that time, ceramics and pottery, they're kind of, you know, dotted around. But it was the discovery of this mineral, this clay mineral, that caused a huge explosion, an industry in Jingdezhen. And Jingdezhen actually became the Amazon of the ceramics industry, the global ceramics industry. And what they did, these artisans in this city, they quarried and mined the kaolinite, and they created beautiful ceramics, which they exported all over the world, and completely changed, you know, culture in Europe. You know, tea drinking became part, well, certainly if you live in the UK, tea drinking became part of our culture, and it was brought to England, at least, by granite. These are the stories that bring, for me and the people I meet, they bring geology alive. How does geology connect to people? We've heard so many amazing talks today. Gia has, I loved your talk, by the way. I thought it was brilliant. How does geology connect and inspire people? And how we make it matter to their lives? This is what I'm really passionate about. I was at the British Museum in London earlier this year for one of the most spectacular exhibitions. They brought together objects from all over Europe. And this object here, this is a mace head, which is roughly 5,000 years old. Now, I'm sure most people here have gone to a beach, or they've gone out into the landscape and they've picked up a rock, and you've thought to yourself, yeah, that's really special. That looks beautiful. I'm going to take that home and put it on my bookshelf. the person who picked this rock up 5,000 years ago had the same idea. They picked it up. They thought, that looks really nice. I'm going to make it into somebody, make it for somebody who's really important for me. And we don't know who that person was. It might have, and this is what archaeologists say, these mace heads were found in burial pits in Salisbury Plain. And usually they were buried with people of great importance, leaders of that community. So this mace head was picked up by somebody who wanted to create a beautiful expression of the respect that they had for their leader. Not just that though, there's that geological story there as well. This rock is one of the oldest rocks in the British Isles. It's a Louisian gneiss, which dates back about 2.7 billion years old. What really, here's the emoji, the mind-blown emoji, is you've got two stories here. You have the human story, so this Mesolithic person, we don't know if it was a man or a woman, a Mesolithic person picking up this pebble and carving it into a beautiful mace head. Then underneath that, we have the geological story that this rock was born deep in the heart of the earth. And those two stories that come together, they kind of make your heart beat faster. It's a really extraordinary palimpsest. People overuse that word palimpsest, but it's a layering of stories. And this is how we bring geology to life. Life is one of the key aspects of how we talk about geodiversity. And by the way, happy International Geodiversity Day. So happy birthday, rocks. I live on the Jurassic, I don't literally live on the Jurassic Coast World Heritage Site. That would be amazing, but dangerous. I live in Dorset, where we have one of the world's greatest geological World Heritage Sites. And it is an extraordinary site that records 185 million years of Earth's history in a near complete sequence. So please come and see me, please. But rocks are extraordinary storytellers of who we are, our origins and connections to the Earth. And geodiversity is that important component of looking after these rocks and conserving them. So this story is here, not just for today, but for the future. I love this. This is such an evocative image. There's a really close link between humans and rock, and it's been there for over 40,000 years since humans have first evolved. This is a handprint, a stenciled hand on a piece of limestone on a cave in Indonesia. And what I find amazing about these stories of ancient people is that they had such a reverence and a connection with rock. Do we have that today? I don't know. I don't think we do. I think a lot of us in this room work with rock. We work in a space where we are scientifically invested in how it can improve our economic and social situations, the situation we currently exist in terms of climate change. But I think it's really important to also respect and understand that connection, that deeper connection and understanding that people had with rocks that I think, and I argue that we have now lost. And because we've lost that, I don't think people look at rocks in the same way they used to, like this person here. This person, 40,000 years ago, ground up a rock, mixed it with water, they put it in their mouth, they put their hand on that ancient limestone and blew across it, creating a stencil of their hand. Why did they do that? I think we have to ask that question. Why? Why did they want to make that mark? Was it because they wanted to give us a message about how much the rock and the land meant to them? What were they trying to tell us? That this moment, they didn't know that this moment would endure for 40,000 years. But here it is to show us that time is a key part of who we are. And if we look back to the past, somehow we are connected to that person, and that connection is through rock. I also love this. when I talk about how to engage your hearts and minds with rock, I always like to look at it through an elemental perspective. This is all about ice. This is the world's largest glacial erratic. It is extraordinary. It's the size of, you know, a 3-story building. I've not been there, I hope to go there. But there's a beautiful story behind this. The native people, the Blackfoot peoples, who are the indigenous people in Alberta, they have this wonderful story about one of their demigods who rested on this rock, put his cloak on this rock, and then as he walked away, he gifted his cloak to the rock. And then it started to rain. He was like, oh, you know what? I'm going to take my cloak back. So he took it back. And the rock got really angry, like really cross, like angry emoji. And then as he was walking off, the rock started to roll after him. And this guy got super scared and he kept running and he kept calling the beasts of the world to stop the rock from killing him. And then in the end, it was the bats that he called upon to stop the rock. And what the bats did was they crashed into the rock. And as they did so, they broke it into 2 pieces. And the rock was then, it stayed in the landscape. And the demigod escaped with his cloak, of course. But these beautiful stories from our ancestors, they felt a resonance and a connection with the rock. And when we talk about geoconservation and geodiversity, of course, it's about looking after really important geological places like this, but they are intrinsically tied to stories in the landscape that have been passed orally, because these are oral histories. When we talk about intangible heritage and indigenous communities, those stories are passed down through the words and the stories and the narratives, generation after generation. This story tells us about a deeper understanding, a visceral understanding that those indigenous people had with the land that they lived in. And they see this erratic as a sentient being in the landscape. It has a spirit. It's imbued with a voice and meaning. And I think that's magical. And I think as geologists, we are so consumed with a mission to look at rocks as economic gain that we often forget that they mean something different to other people. I'm going to finish up soon, but I wanted to give you this to ponder, that not everybody has looked at rocks in the same way as indigenous people, as the Blackfoot peoples and their Okotok erratic. This is a picture of the gold rush in 1852. And this is from California, this image. The gold there formed because of submarine volcanoes that were erupting. Probably, I can't remember my geology here, but about 350 million years ago, possibly older. The lava that was erupting onto the seabed was very rich in gold minerals. Then that part of the crust was subducted, and then the gold was brought back up into the crust again through magmatic activity, where it then, moved through veins and all sorts of different thermal systems into the rock. And then obviously gold being denser was washed out into the rivers, out of the rock. And then the gold rush started in the 1850s, and the white settlers came and they ravaged the landscape for the gold. But it wasn't just the landscape that was colonized, destroyed, ravaged, it was the people. And I think what we have to remember with the geoheritage and the geodiversity are these human stories. There were thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of Native American people, the First Nations people that died as a result of this huge invasion of settlers looking for economic gain. They call it the California genocide. And I think this is a really important kind of concept for us to understand, is the human cost associated with that economic gain. And this is history. Those voices are now lost, their stories are now lost. Their connection with the land, their connection with rock. We don't have that anymore, but we still have it in other areas, like in Alberta with Blackfoot peoples. And this is what I'm really passionate about, is helping the scientific community to reach out and understand those stories, because within those stories are embedded a very deep understanding of landscape and science and connection and human resilience. So much is there that we can learn from. And I think this is what I want to leave you with on International Geodiversity Day. It is as much about the science of the rocks and how they formed and their evolution and what they tell us about life on Earth, but it is also underpinned by the human connection. And there is no way that anybody in this room can do the work they do, whether it's with natural hazards or mining or resources, without bringing humans with you, without embedding that sense of humanity and the human stories. It is all part of the same narrative and the discourse. Thank you so much for having me here. You want to follow me?